For centuries, literature from Shakespeare to Dracula has warned us the blood is the life, the breath is the spirit, and paleness is a herald of sickness. Yet in our modern age, we've traded this ancient intuitive wisdom for a superficial, bureaucratic approach to health. We see a rising tide of depression, anxiety, confusion, and we're told that mental illness is a mystery of the mind. It's a labyrinth of chemistry and trauma that requires endless medication and talk therapy in order to navigate. But what if we've been looking in the wrong place? What if our focus on the intangible has blinded us to the most basic requirement of life itself? Oxygen. Today, we go beyond the pale. We are looking at the connection between breath, blood, and the very way we perceive reality. From the heights of the third man syndromes to the depths of postpartum depression and gender dysphoria, we confront the uncomfortable truth that while we obsess over identity, we are ignoring the physiological reality of our own fragility. Today, I welcome Brendan Reesor to the channel, author of the book Beyond the Pale. Join me as we discuss why the most essential key to our mental health has likely been hiding in plain sight, right here on Black Box Warning.
I've got a lot to say, can't hold it in this time, got no filter, I got no filter, no filter, I got no filter, no filter, I got no filter, no filter, I got no filter.
Brendan Reesor, welcome to the channel.
Thanks for having me.
You have quite the interesting theory about anemia and diet and mental illness, and I can't really wait to get into this. You've talked in other interviews about how a lot of what your journey started at is like in the cesspit that we know as to be college. So if you could kind of, I don't know, start from how you realized that there were things that you needed to address and what you did about it and how this journey started.
Yeah, so going back to my university days, I was trying to eat more and more plant-based, and my health just got worse and worse, and I was very confusing for me because I thought I was doing everything right. Eventually, I came across a video talking about Michaela Peterson doing carnivore, and it was quite shocking at first. I thought, people would just die if they didn't eat fruits and vegetables. But the logic started to make a lot of sense to me, just that a lot of plant foods, like they have defense chemicals to deter animals from eating them. And I was already having to avoid a lot of different types of plant foods, and I was having troubles with them. So it started to make sense to me, and I gave it a try. And in the end, I didn't end up sticking with a carnivore diet. And I basically, if people are curious, my diet now is just to avoid plants and plant toxins that I'm sensitive to. But I do better with carbohydrates. So I eat a lot of meat. I also eat a lot of rice, cheese, that sort of thing, but very plain. And I just don't eat fruits and vegetables at all. And that works well for me.
And I'm going to interject and say, I'm assuming that you don't eat processed foods.
Yeah, correct. So
I mean, that's kind of a given. Like most people don't, because if you have problems with plants, usually the processed stuff or the artificial stuff, it's going to usually bother you too. So, okay.
Yeah.
All right.
And so, yeah, I avoid like any vegetable oils and anything like that. But so I was happy to come across carnivore for that reason, because my health improved a lot for just avoiding the plant foods. And I also fixed my anemia. So this is kind of gets to how I started to notice the pattern that I saw, because I always used to be quite pale. And I used to bruise really easily. I would get sick once, twice, sometimes 3 times a year. I had all sorts of kind of minor health problems that seemed to go away once I started to get lots of red meat. And I only changed my diet to improve my physical health, but what surprised me was that my mental health improved a lot as well. So my anxiety went away, and I wouldn't have had an anxiety diagnosis or anything, but it was just like looking back afterwards, it was like, wow, like I used to be way more anxious. And like now,
Mm-hmm.
now that I'm not, I feel so nice. I feel calm and relaxed. And then the same thing with gender dysphoria. And like, I wouldn't, I was never thinking that I was transgender, but I just like had mild feelings of gender dysphoria. And
Mm-hmm.
that also just went away. And I felt masculine and calm and confident for the first time. Um, and and then more surprisingly was that my outlook on life
Mm-hmm.
changed drastically as well. So I used to be like a social justice warrior type person.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and it just like it very quickly and organically changed. Nobody convinced
Mm-hmm.
me that I should change my mind. The world around me hadn't changed, but I had
Mm-hmm.
changed, and so the way that I saw the world changed
Mm-hmm.
as well.
So the diet kind of red pilled you.
It did big
Like in
time,
a
yeah.
way, it's just a very dark outlook because
Mhm.
that, and over time, like that's just gotten worse and worse and worse, especially on in the universities and things like that. And it doesn't make any sense to me. I understand indoctrination is a big thing, but it always just made me think there's got to be more to this. We're the virus basically, and we're just like the things that need to be removed from the planet. The humans need to go and everything. As you're using your iPhone, that came from China and the with the suicide nets and whatnot. So it's like it didn't make any sense because no rational person would behave in a lot of the ways that you see the patterns were, unfolding. So,
Yeah. On one level, it is very irrational. And so this was me. I used to think that humans were canceling the earth and climate
mm-hmm.
change was going to be terrible. And just like all of these things, I had a really
Mm-hmm.
negative outlook on things. And at one level, it is very irrational. And we'll get back to it. But basically, it's because their brains are not getting enough oxygen. And
Mm-hmm.
to be able to be rational, that is a very energy demanding thing for the brain,
Mm-hmm.
and it's very sensitive to a lack of oxygen or other malnourishments. But on another level, it is perfectly rational in an adaptive sense. In that, if you are weak and vulnerable, it is
Mm-hmm.
adaptive to be anxious and
Mm-hmm.
to view the world as a terrible place. It
Mm-hmm.
is adaptive to view the world through a victimizer lens, because you are in a state of weakness, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it doesn't matter if you're psychologically or physically weak, and I don't really see much of a difference between the two. It will change how you look out into the world. And what I
Mm-hmm.
started to realize was that uh, uh, trying to reflect on like why my psychology changed so much, I realized that mental health is largely a reflection of physical health.
Mm-hmm.
In that, if you're constantly getting signals from your inside, from your physiology, that things are bad, things are bad, things are bad, then
Mm-hmm.
it will bubble up into your more conscious mind to the point where you look out into the world around you and you
Mm-hmm.
think like so confidently that things are bad, right? You
Mm-hmm.
see it through that lens, and you're also just looking for what the things are bad could be to rationalize, why am I constantly feeling this way? Because it's
Mm-hmm.
confusing. I constantly feel like there's something wrong, right? So I need to find something. The only thing worse than feeling that way is feeling
Mm-hmm.
that way and not knowing why. But if you can attach yourself to other things, such as, oh, okay, something's wrong, and it's
Mm-hmm.
because of climate change, or it's because of like this thing in society, it's because there's
Mm-hmm.
this evil patriarchy or whatever, then it's much more comforting, and it's like a rationalization of your feelings. Now, we look out into the outer world all the
Mm-hmm.
time to try and figure out what's changing our psychology. Why do we feel this way? And that's appropriate at times, but we forget the other side of the coin. That is our inner world. Our physiology
Mm-hmm.
uh, is always influencing our mental state.
Mm-hmm.
And if you are balanced and if things are good, then you will feel peaceful and you will feel that things are good. If things
Mm-hmm.
are completely chaotic and out of whack, then that will reflect in your mental
Mm-hmm.
state.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense actually. And a lot of times I don't think people get the chance to even figure that out. So it's amazing that you figured this out because usually they're medicated.
Yeah, and that's kind of been my aim to make it make sense. I love to solve problems and to understand complex patterns. And for me, when I was struggling, like there was no way that I was going to like that let that be my life for the rest of my life. And you know, I can't. I can only take so much pride in that because I don't know what at some point in my life that confidence was instilled in me. But a lot of people they just accept it, and that's unfortunate. And I wish that that wasn't the case. But I knew that I could figure it out and change it for myself, and I got really lucky in a lot of ways. But afterwards, I really wanted to understand it as well, um, and and it took a very long time to properly understand it. But now that I do understand it, I can explain things to people, and they it immediately makes sense. It is so easy and obvious. Now we have like an epidemic of mental illness, and everybody is talking about it. Every podcast and they're talking about it on the news and everywhere, right? There is not a single person who is talking about it from the perspective that I am. That is that you need to realize the brain is not functioning properly. If you're chronically mentally ill, the brain is not functioning properly. What does the brain need to function properly? You go down the list. First and foremost, it needs oxygen. Is it getting enough oxygen? You need to address that, right? And I didn't realize it from taking that approach. What I realized was that, like me, there are a lot of people out there who have mental illnesses, who are very pale, noticeably pale, like I was. A lot of people who are in this category are on plant-based diets, and in the whole woke social justice warrior gender dysphoria bubble, it's much more common in females than it is in males, especially once you hit puberty. Now, this pattern is also true with the most common mental illnesses. So, depression, anxiety, and somatic symptom disorders are probably the three most common mental illnesses, and they are twice as common in women as they are in men. This is true across all cultures, and specifically, the disparity only begins after puberty. And
Now,
why?
one thing, explain for the people watching somatic symptom disorders.
Yeah, so somatic symptom disorders is basically like you have a lot of anxiety and you feel like there's something terribly wrong with your body, right? Something's wrong. And you might be a hypochondriac or a hypochondriac, and like you constantly feel like you're ill with something or another.
Oh,
You
okay.
might have body dysmorphia where like you think that you're fat, but you're obviously not, or or I would argue gender dysphoria would fall into this as well, and we can talk more about that later. But basically, it's this feeling that there's something wrong with you, whether or not there is actually something physically, organically wrong with you.
Okay.
So it's a kind of a mental illness that feels like you have bodily illness.
Okay.
Um, so looking at this whole pattern, uh, with the paleness, like what people need to realize is that there are two different types of paleness. So you can be pale because you lack sunshine and you're just not, you haven't tanned enough, you're not producing much melanin, and you can be pale because of that. You can also be pale because you lack blood, because you are anemic and you lack blood underneath your skin, and the blood, it gives a bright red, rosy color to your complexion, and that gives, if you don't have that, you can look much more pale in a specific way, and there's a difference, and you can perceive the differences if you pay attention. And I noticed this paleness, and I knew that it was true for myself, that I used to be pale, and I noticed that literally just about every single person with gender dysphoria and every single person who is the extreme woke social justice warrior is clearly visibly pale in this way. They are anemic. Um, and so I started to realize basically the importance of iron deficiency and oxygen.
Mm-hmm.
Now, fundamentally, what anemia means is it's a lack of blood. A or an, the prefix, means to lack or without. Hema means blood. Anemia, lack blood, to be without blood. Uh, and you can see this if you just look with your eyes. As long as you're not colorblind, you can look with your eyes and you'll notice this pattern. But going back to the mental illness, like it is because the brain is lacking oxygen. If you don't have enough blood, you can't deliver enough oxygen because the blood delivers oxygen to all of your tissues.
Mm-hmm.
Why is the brain affected most? It's because the brain is most sensitive to hypoxia. So the brain is made up of neurons, and neurons are purely aerobic. Many
Mm-hmm.
cell types in your body, like your skin cells or your gut cells, they can use aerobic metabolism when there's oxygen available, or they can use anaerobic metabolism when there's not enough oxygen available.
Mm-hmm.
Neurons and like certain cardiac muscle cells, they are purely aerobic. They can only use oxygen, right? So whenever there is a lack of oxygen, the brain is the first to suffer. It is the most
Mm-hmm.
sensitive to hypoxia.
And
And
it's
so
quick. It's quick. It's
it
very
is
quick.
very quick.
Like you can't go if you are not getting oxygen to your brain. You're going to have brain death. Like I
Exactly.
forgot how fast it is, but it's very fast.
Yeah,
So you're
in
absolutely
minutes
correct.
you start to, and
Mm-hmm.
basically the only reason why it's not quicker and it's not seconds is because there's a bit of oxygen still circulating
Mm-hmm.
in your blood and in your tissues. And but yeah, it like within minutes it'll damage your brain. And if you're constantly not getting enough oxygen,
Mm-hmm.
uh, basically the brain will suffer, in mild chronic ways. And how it works is basically the body has like layers to it, and the things that are deeper are more vital and more important to survival, and the things that are more peripheral and on the outside are a
Mm-hmm.
bit newer evolutionarily speaking, and they're less vital to survival. Now, what happens when you lack blood is it will disappear from your skin quicker than it will disappear from your lungs and your kidneys and your heart, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because you need to keep a certain amount of blood in your vital organs to
Mm-hmm.
survive, right? Your
Yep.
skin can go without blood with limited perfusion for a bit, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now, the same thing happens in the brain. So the brain has some layers to it. The brain stem is kind of like evolutionarily the most ancient, and it's deep within the brain. The neocortex, which is what humans are, it's responsible for everything that humans are most proud of. So if you're thinking about mathematics, if you're using logic or reason, if you are, language,
Mm-hmm.
memory, social understanding, mapping your body and the world around you, right, to create conceptual maps and also just like real spatial maps. All of these things are performed in the neocortex, which is the outer layer of the brain.
Mm-hmm.
So when your brain is lacking oxygen, even though these things are really cool functions of the brain, they are less vital to survival than what the brainstem does, for example. The
Mm-hmm.
brainstem keeps you breathing, it keeps your heart pumping, it keeps
Mm-hmm.
your body temperature correct and your appetite and stuff like that. Right. So what the brain does is it preferentially preserves everything that is more vital. So the outside of the brain, the neocortex, will get less blood flow uh, in order to favor the more vital parts of the brain, right?
Mm-hmm.
And if this is happening when you're a fetus in your mother's womb, if your mother doesn't have enough blood, then it will hamper your brain development, but most particularly, it will hamper the development of your neocortex,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so that can really affect somebody's, you know, neurological development and their
Mm-hmm.
intelligence and their ability to reason later on in life. It can also affect their behaviors because your frontal lobe really kind of controls and inhibits your lower brain regions to make you do the things that you don't want to do, but you have to do because they're good for you.
Mm-hmm.
But
And,
yeah,
and
go ahead.
one thing I wanted to interject here because you're talking about fetal development. is that one of the things I heard you talking about that was very interesting, and this is very topical to me, is my daughter just had a baby. So, and this is again with the common sense approach. Like, I don't remember. I'm a med tech. Like, my background is I'm a chemist. I worked in pharmaceuticals for years as a chemist, and then now I'm in regulatory, but and medical devices. But before that, I was a medical technologist, licensed by ASCP. Right. So I worked in hospitals, and that's labs, 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 and more labs. Right. And so hemoglobin and hematocrit are two of the things that, after my daughter had the baby, it's like I noticed her hemoglobin was lower. It was around
Mhm.
9. It wasn't significantly lower. It's not in blood transfusion range. And hematocrit was a little lower. And I said, well, you know what? I said, I bet this is normal because you just bled a lot. You had a vaginal birth, and it's like you lose a lot of blood, so it makes sense, right? And it got me thinking because my son, his fiance, had a child, and she went through serious postpartum depression, like really bad postpartum depression. I'm wondering, with the postpartum, like you've brought this up in other interviews, that's on the rise too, because my son was like, well, when his sister has a child, he was going, well, she's going to be all sad and everything after she has a baby. And I said, not everybody does that. Like, I didn't do that. Like, is that your perception of people your age, is that everyone goes into postpartum depression? And he said, yeah, pretty much, like everybody he knows did. So that's another thing I wanted to get you to speak about, which I think is very interesting.
Yeah, and I go over this in detail in my book, and it's something that like I get oddly passionate about, and I say oddly because like I don't know anybody who's like I haven't been around somebody when they suffer with postpartum
Mm-hmm.
depression, but it really pisses me off because it is something that is so obvious. If you
Mm-hmm.
look on any public-facing health website, such as the Mayo Clinic or Johns Hopkins, you will find absolutely zero mention about iron deficiency or anemia as possible contributors to postpartum depression. And why this is just absolutely beyond me, because if you do some just basic research and look into it, there is a lot of literature to support that women
Mm-hmm.
with lower hemoglobin values, lower ferritin and iron levels, they have worse postpartum depression, and it's,
Mm-hmm.
they're more likely to have it, and it lasts for longer. And if you improve those values, then they improve their mental health as well.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just so beyond that, it's just so obvious because like women used to die very frequently from blood loss, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's a very big issue that you can lose a lot of blood. Now, if losing enough blood kills you, what do you think is going to happen if you
Yeah.
don't lose enough blood to kill
Yeah.
you, but you still
Mm-hmm.
lose like half that much? Like it's not like everything's going to be fine and dandy. Like you're going to lose a lot of vigor and life and energy, right? Like your blood, it is the life in a way. It's just perfectly obvious, and I go over why it's not the drop in hormones; it's the blood loss. Um, but this is so important. And I don't know if this has become more common. I haven't looked at how it's changed over time. It wouldn't surprise me just because mental illness has become more common, and I believe anemia has become more common, and that's one of the big reasons why mental illness has become more common. But I can't comment on that. I will comment on the blood values though, and if you've heard some of my other podcasts, you might have heard me speaking about this. There's a very terrible issue with the way that anemia is measured, and that is they measure it based on concentration. So as you said, your daughter, she had a hemoglobin concentration of 9, which is quite low. And like you said, it's not like blood transfusion low, but it's significantly below like the normal range. And if you don't look at that, you look at hematocrit, which is also just a concentration based measurement. And both of these measurements, because they're concentration based, they can vary based on the plasma volume. And plasma is just the water, the salty electrolyte water part of the blood. You have the plasma, and then you have the red cells, right? Uh, and concentration does not equal total amount. If I should have 5 liters of blood in my bloodstream, you know, but I only have 3 liters, it doesn't matter what my concentration is, right? I don't have enough blood. And so even if I have a normal concentration in both cases, whether I have 5 liters or 3 liters, I'm going to have 60% of the oxygen delivering capacity that I should have if I only have 3 liters. So it's a terrible issue, and I'm working on a more academic scientific paper to submit about this. Um, and I can go on about it all day, but I won't. It's just a terrible issue with the way that it's measured. And what I'm getting at is if that's like, don't go off of just those measurements. If you're wondering, if you're at home listening, you think that you're anemic, but your hemoglobin concentration is normal, you don't know if you actually have enough hemoglobin because that's just your hemoglobin concentration. It's not your total amount, and they will not measure your total amount. So another thing to look at would be your ferritin. And I don't know how reliable this will be, but I think it would be a good proxy because your ferritin tells you how much iron you have stored up. And that's usually the rate limiting factor for producing hemoglobin. If your ferritin is really low, especially if it's below 30, then you should be concerned your body is probably not producing enough hemoglobin and you probably lack blood to deliver oxygen to your tissues.
Well,
And
you know something interesting, and I don't know if anybody's ever talked to you about this, but lab tests in general, there's a lot of crappy ones. They're
mhm,
just crappy and invalid. And one of the worst ones is hemoglobin A1C,
mhm.
because hemoglobin A1C is based, and I was looking up the age of it. So it relies on the age of your blood cells. Okay. And it's like, well, it's
120 is usually the
100,
average.
yes, so it's like, but it can be like a barn door.
Yeah.
So you don't know how old. And the thing is, with carnivores especially, they believe, well, some people are speculating that if you have a different diet, if you're not eating a crap diet or you're eating whole foods versus standard American diet person, I'll bet you your blood cells are going to live a lot longer. They're going to, be more durable. And so that's really going to throw that off. But
Yeah.
again, and so, in that case, you would look at like fructosamine, which is looking at the oxidation rate of like albumin or whatever. So it's something that, is a different test, but you would need multiple tests. And then also the fact that when it comes to people's diets, they're not eating heme iron in a lot of cases. So they're telling them, oh, eat a bunch of spinach. Really? Well, that's like the ferric. It's ferric iron that's attached to an organic compound. And so that's not even that bioavailable. Like you're getting like 0.3% out of like whatever, if you're eating 100 grams or something crazy. So they're not even getting the nutrition that they need when it comes to iron. You're not even getting the iron that you're supposed to eat. You definitely need to eat a lot of red meat. So that's what I told my daughter. I was like, you've got to be eating a lot of red meat. What does she do? She starts eating fish.
Yeah.
I'm like, stop eating fish. It's like fish is fine, but like not right now. You need to be eating a lot of beef, but you know,
Yeah. Yeah,
so
it can be very difficult for people to kind of change their minds on this thing for various reasons, and it can be very unfortunate. But yeah, like if anybody wants to know my advice, like don't try to use plant foods to correct your iron deficiency. It won't help. It'll actually make things worse. And you need to focus on mostly red meat
yeah.
to get your iron up.
Yeah, and the oxalates, I think end up causing a lot of problem, and
Exactly.
with absorption and stuff like that. When you went carnivore, what did you notice? And I know you didn't stay, which people don't have to stay strict carnivore or anything, but when you discovered that you were not getting the proper nutrition and you needed to add the meat and everything and get away from the veganism, what improved for you? Like, what was the biggest? Was it the mental illness part aspect? Was it the mental issues that you were having and the anxiety that was the most dramatic change? Just getting the proper nutrition in, because I think a lot of people think, oh well, I can't go carnivore, and it's like, because that's just too different and I wouldn't be happy with it and that kind of thing. And honest to God, like I think that the population is so sick and they're not getting any nutrition, that if you just eat things that either grow out of the ground that are not too toxic, the lesser type of things like that, and just whole foods, meat, you get enough animal products to actually get you nutrition, I think that most people would be drastically improved, And then you can look at, like, Anthony Chaffee says, plants are trying to kill you. I kind of agree with that because I can't really eat any plants, but that's just me because I'm sensitive to it.
For me, I think the big issue for me is that I'm very sensitive to these plant foods, and so for me, definitely like the different mental state, that was a big deal. The not bruising so much, that was like a very obvious one for my anemia. But I mean, things really came together well for myself when I incorporated carbohydrates again, just because like I could get enough energy as well. Um, like, but just like avoiding the plant foods, like the oxalates were really giving me a lot of problems, like urinary tract problems and like anxiety as well. Like I would have speech difficulties as well. It was that my tongue was like physically less articulate and like
Oh,
my
wow.
vocal muscles. And I believe that oxalates and lectins and some other plant compounds, what they do is they basically cause inflammation or somehow affect the brainstem and the cranial nerves that originate in the brainstem. And the cranial nerves, they do things like control like your facial contractions, your eyes, your tongue, and tongue articulation, things like this. And so, like with oxalates, I even noticed because sometimes I would mess up and I would have oxalates again after not having them, and I realized that like, oh, like when I was a kid and I kind of really didn't like eye contact, all of a sudden now that I have these oxalates again, I can't make eye contact. Like I just want to put my head down. It's just like it's
Wow.
overwhelming. And like I think that these things are like a brainstem thing. And like the tongue articulation part, I think that was a brainstem or a cranial nerve issue. And I see this actually a fair bit. People who are vegan, they often have a partial palsy of the face in that the seventh cranial nerve isn't functioning properly on one side or the other. And they smile like this, like with half
Ah.
the face, and it's a crooked smile. And they talk like that. And it's just that the other side isn't working properly. It's not functioning. It's not contracting as much,
Well, it's
right?
like Bell's palsy. Like,
Exactly. It is
I'll,
that. It's just a
yeah,
partial palsy of
yeah,
the cranial nerve.
yeah.
Um, and I have other reasons for suspecting that these plant compounds are affecting the cranial nerves, but I guess yeah, I just leave it at that. Um, but yeah, like people ought to just like give it a try. I know you were saying how uh, carnivore might be too extreme for a lot of people, and like yeah, it is. And so like just like try, like not, I don't think everybody has to do what I do, but like what I do is a bit of a compromise in that I just eat a lot of white rice with cheese and meat, and I just like avoid plants like fruits and vegetables, and it does me really well. And I think I'm a sensitive, like I have a sensitive body for that stuff, because there's a lot of people who they eat fruits and veggies and they're fine, and that's great. But don't be like going out of your way to eat spinach or like
Oh
chia
no,
seeds
yeah,
or something like that. It's just like
yeah.
these things, they're not nutritious. They're nutritious on paper, but
It's
in
not
real life,
real. Yeah,
yeah,
it's not real. It's a marketing or whatever.
yeah.
It is actually marketing. When you eat the rainbow, what the hell is that supposed to mean? And where did that come from? It doesn't really make a whole lot of sense because it's not bioavailable in most cases,
Mhm.
And I think that the way that we were meant to eat, that meat is required for health. Like if you're getting rid of meat, you've got a problem. And it sounds like your diet sounds very simple, which I think you're limiting even the carbohydrates to the ones that are not going to cause you all kinds of problems. You know what I mean? They're very easy to digest, that sort of
Mhm.
thing for you. So that makes perfect sense. And I think if people would just move towards that approach, just pick things that don't bother you and really actually look at what you're eating and how it's making you feel. But I swear to God, it seems like to me that the industry has an idea of, you've got all these lab tests, half of them are just like squirts and dog tails. They honestly are not they're not that valid, but they've been around for like, I don't know, God knows how long, and everyone is worshiping these lab tests. And like you were saying with anemia, and that you could be anemic, but actually, blood volume's not taken into consideration. That's got to be different for different people. I mean, everything else is when it comes to like the
It
age of the
is, yeah.
red blood cells. Yeah. So that would make the test like not necessarily, you're not able to really determine if somebody is or not.
Yeah.
But I'll tell you what, we're taught to not believe our own lying eyes. We are supposed to be told what to believe. Something interesting that is in the introduction on Amazon to your book is you're talking about from Genesis to Shakespeare to Dracula, the life is in the blood. And I'll tell you what, when you see people that are sick and pale, and I mean pale in the sick way, you know it. You can see
Mhm.
it. You can sense it. Like if you were in the wild, you would not be picked as a mate because you would be sickly. So,
Mhm.
I mean, it's common sense. It's critical thinking. It's something that I don't know. It's just been gone with. I don't, and that's even the people that eat meat. A lot of times don't have a lot of critical thinking going on, so it seems to be a rare talent. So that's very interesting. Now you also talked about some of the well-known facts about the brain and how it needs oxygen. If you go up into say mountain climbers and some of the experiences they have, so you got some examples of like for people who don't know like what happens to these people when they actually are in an element like that.
Yeah, so when people go up to high altitude, it gives a great extreme example of what happens to the brain when it's not getting enough oxygen. And I
Mm-hmm.
love to look at the extremes of patterns because when it is extreme, you might think, well, okay, that doesn't apply because it's so
Mm-hmm.
extreme. But no, it just makes the pattern more clear, right? Like if somebody were to drink a small bit of poison every single day, they might not notice it.
Mm-hmm.
But if they were to one day drink like 10 times the dose, and then
Mm-hmm.
they drop dead, other people would notice and be like, oh, wait, maybe there's something wrong with that, whatever they were drinking every day, right?
Mm-hmm.
It just makes things more clear. And this is important because there are a lot of people who, they're a little bit anemic, right? And their
Mm-hmm.
brain's just like not getting quite as much oxygen as it should get. And so
Mm-hmm.
they kind of fit this pattern, but it's not extreme, right? And if we never looked at the extreme examples, we wouldn't be able to see what the problem is, the problem being that their brain is not getting enough oxygen. And so when people go up to high altitude, their senses become hallucinatory and delusional. They will stutter their words. They can't think straight. People actually have like worse mental health if they live up there full time. And they do studies either on people who like live up at high altitude full time, or they might take a group of people and then just like bring them up to elevation and do like temporary tests on them, measure their scores of like mood and anxiety and things of this nature.
Mm-hmm.
But in every way, or better put, like every psychiatric problem you can imagine is more likely at high altitude. And it's very
Mm-hmm.
simple. It's just that the brain is not getting enough oxygen because the atmospheric pressure is lower the higher you go. A common thing is this third man syndrome for people like climbing Mount Everest, for example. They will start to hallucinate that there is this presence with them, even if they're by themselves.
Mm-hmm.
And it's remarkable how similar the pattern happens in different people.
Mm-hmm.
But they're climbing Mount Everest and they're tired, but they're still pushing. And then, this one guy, he had like a granola bar and he kept thinking that there's somebody right beside him. Right. But whenever you look and like there's nobody there, like,
Mm-hmm.
okay, well, it,
Yeah.
it just kind of evaporates. Right. It's a felt presence that there's somebody there. And, it's so strong that this guy with his granola bar or whatever, he like tried to hand half of the granola bar to this presence, and, there's nothing
Yeah.
there. Right.
Yeah.
And, uh, like this happens not just at high altitude, but it also happened to the last person out of the Twin Towers when they were going through the smoke in the
Mhm.
stairwell, right? Because they're also not getting enough oxygen. It's
Mhm.
happened to scuba divers when their oxygen tank is running low.
Mhm.
It's happened to people who are castaways at sea
Mhm.
because they become severely dehydrated and anemic.
Mhm.
It happens to people who have just been bleeding out, right? So they're losing a lot of
Mhm.
blood. And in every case, it happens to people when their brain is not getting enough oxygen.
Mhm.
And they are getting faulty signals from their somatosensory system, which is the system that kind of monitors your body and kind of tells you what's going on. And if you're getting faulty signals from your body,
Mhm.
you might kind of hallucinate things. And the leading theory on why there's a felt presence is that they are basically perceiving their own body, but instead of perceiving it where their body actually is, like I'm doing right now, I'm aware that my
Mhm.
body is in this chair right
Mhm.
now and everything is working fine. If I wasn't getting enough oxygen, I might perceive that my body is like 2 feet to the left of me or 2 feet to the right of me, right? And
Oh.
so that's what they believe is going on. But basically, what it shows is that the somatosensory system, it's a very it it's it's on the outer layer of the brain. It's
Mhm.
very sensitive to hypoxia. It's one of the first things to go.
Mm.
And so this is what I think is going on with somatic symptom disorders and gender dysphoria. And basically, if you have this combination of anxiety because you're suffocating, and
Mhm.
we didn't even get into this, but
Mhm.
perhaps I should
Uh,
describe
yeah,
anxiety
definitely.
for a bit.
Yeah.
So what I realized, why I was so anxious all the time, I was trying to understand this. Like, okay, I'm
Mhm.
constantly getting signals that something's wrong. But what would these signals be, right? And I kind of think like maybe it's high cortisol or high blood pressure or low blood sugar or something like that,
Mhm.
right? And then it hit me one day when I was doing research on people at elevation having psychiatric issues, is
Mhm.
that the ultimate things are bad signal is that you're suffocating and that you're not getting enough oxygen and that your
Mhm.
blood is becoming too acidic. And anybody at home, goes back to common sense, anybody at home can just hold their breath for 30 seconds
Mhm.
and pay attention to their mental state.
Mhm.
And they will find that their psychology
Mhm.
changes,
And
right?
I'm a scuba diver, so I know exactly what, because there's been times when you get into certain situations when you're scuba diving, and you know exactly, I know exactly what you're talking about,
Yeah.
because if you start to suffocate, that is a very, very unique experience. You know what
Yeah.
I mean? So that is a very terrifying and unique experience. So
Yeah.
I can understand that.
It's a very ancient response. The body
Mhm.
is very well aware that suffocating is terrible, and as soon as it senses suffocation at all, it sends
Mhm.
signals to your brainstem to one, breathe more, which is obvious, that's adaptive. You need to breathe more if you're suffocating, and two, to panic because maybe you're diving underwater, right? And if
Mhm.
you're going down your dive and your blood is starting to get acidic, you can't just be calm and relaxed and be like, "Oh, I'll be fine. I'll make it back to the top." At a certain
Mhm.
point, you need to get really panicky and think, no, I better head back
Mhm.
up, right?
Yep.
And you can think of other examples, right? If you're being strangled by something, or if you're, you know, there's lots of different ways that your body can be suffocating.
Mhm.
But anybody can just hold their breath and they'll notice that you start to get really panicky when
Mhm.
your blood gets very acidic, right? And so if you're constantly getting this signal that something's wrong, something's wrong, something's wrong, and your somatosensory system, which is, a very peripheral part of the neocortex, if it's not getting enough oxygen and it is faulty, you're getting faulty signals about what's going on with your body, right?
Mm.
Then this something is wrong is going to manifest as there's something wrong with my body. There's something terribly
Mhm.
wrong with my body, and I don't quite know what, right? And then, you add the social element to it, right? If we lived in a world where, you told every single kid who is a little bit anxious that it's because he has a stomach ache or something, they would
Mhm.
all like show up. Every single anxious kid with somatic symptom disorder would feel like they have a stomach problem, right?
Mhm.
But if we live in a world where the culture is kind of perpetuating gender dysphoria,
Mhm.
and if you feel like there's something terribly wrong with you, then it's maybe because you're born in the wrong body.
Mm-hmm.
Then this is what resonates with the people who it will resonate with. This is what they will feel.
Mm-hmm.
And there are other reasons for it too. So like I try to give like a nuanced explanation, because like it is partly to do with the culture, right? And
Mm-hmm.
but it is largely to do with physiology. And
Mm-hmm.
another physiological point behind why it manifests, because it can manifest as different things, right? It can be hypochondriasis, or body dysmorphia, or gender dysphoria, or something else, right?
Mm-hmm.
But one of the reasons why particularly it tends to manifest as gender dysphoria, I believe, is because lacking blood and being anemic, it causes female sexual dysfunction. Because
Mm-hmm.
females, if you're going to have a baby, you need to have enough blood volume to support that baby.
Mm-hmm.
And if you don't have enough blood volume, it is adaptive to lower your fecundity and fertility, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you don't want to be having a baby if you're already anemic, because then that will put you at greater risk of blood loss and infection and all sorts of problems, right? And it won't be good for the baby's development either. So women with anemia and iron deficiency, they have lower arousal, less it's harder
Mm-hmm.
to orgasm, less lubrication, all sorts of sexual health
Mm-hmm.
problems, right? And so if you're constantly getting this signal that something's wrong,
Mm-hmm.
if your somatosensory system is faulty, and that your signals from the body
Mm-hmm.
aren't getting processed properly, and you're also, there's something wrong with your sexual health and your fertility, and your hormones are out of whack, and you have society telling you that if you feel like something is wrong, then this is what it is,
Mm-hmm.
right? Then we're going to see certain people uh like with what we see as gender dysphoria today.
Mm-hmm.
And
And that actually makes a lot of sense, because if all of those things are going on, then you're like, well, I don't feel like a woman, is the conclusion that you're probably going to come to,
mhm,
because you won't feel like a woman because of all these hormonal disruptions and all of the things that you're discussing. That's exactly what you wouldn't feel like. So if you don't feel like a woman, you
mhm,
can't be a fire truck. So what you gonna, what are you gonna gravitate towards? And the world is telling you, well, if maybe you're really a man, and
yeah, or
then and you're
non-binary, or
yeah, and you're searching for answers. So you're searching for answers desperately, and then you've got I think it's the perfect storm, honestly. I don't think it's one
mhm,
thing or another. I think that the culture, the searching for answers, and then the logical or the what seems like a logical conclusion. It's like, well, I must be, whatever,
mhm.
something else. So
It's
yeah, that
a
makes sense.
Yeah, like when you're struggling with the like the logical conclusion, it's a rationalization is what
Yeah,
it is. They're
yeah.
rationalizing. And the point of my book is that um, like even though like people who are more like conservative and on the right today, they're yelling and screaming about like gender ideology, and how like
Mm-hmm.
TikTok is polluting people's minds, and it's a gender ideology in the schools. And like I might disagree with some of that stuff, but like there's a reason why it affects certain people. And gender dysphoria today is disproportionately uh, teenage females, right? The
Mm-hmm.
people who are most vulnerable to anemia. And you don't even have to just look at the stats, just look with your eyes. If you just look with your eyes, it is people who are visibly anemic every
Mm-hmm.
single time. It is somebody who is visibly anemic. And I'm sure there are exceptions, and I'm confident that there are exceptions, and I believe that I've seen
Mm-hmm.
exceptions and
Yeah,
such,
but you're
right?
right, like bringing that up, because the people that are most notable, that females in particular, I'm just bringing them to
Mhm.
mind, and I'm like, you're absolutely right. They're
Yeah.
extremely pale, and they don't look healthy.
Yeah,
You
it's
know.
a pattern, and we can learn so much from this pattern. And people with gender dysphoria, most people know this, but some people don't. They have extremely high rates of mental illness, and
Mm-hmm.
it is so unfortunate. And people are talk about all sorts of things except for physiology and physical health.
Mm-hmm.
And like I said, I hope that we could look at this as an extreme example. You see these teenage females with terrible extreme anemia who have extremely high rates of mental illness, and they're struggling so much. And when we see the pattern so clearly here,
Mm-hmm.
we can take away from this and like just help out everybody, because there are for every person who is suffering with this, to the
Mm-hmm.
extreme, there are like 10 women who are suffering with mild anemia, who are a little bit depressed and fatigued, and they're
Mm-hmm.
not sleeping well, and they're bruising, and all of this.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe they're not the extreme social
Mm-hmm.
justice warrior type person, but like, they're slightly anemic, and their brain is not getting enough oxygen, and they're
Mm-hmm.
suffering because of it.
Yeah.
And hopefully,
It might explain a lot of third wave feminism too. So,
yeah.
because women are affected, it seems like, I mean, women bleed all the time. So, I mean, you've got
Mhm.
that, you're losing blood for other reasons, like
Yeah.
normally. The whole patriarchy, like you were saying, the doom and gloom, and let's just eradicate all men, and the extreme version of that, I think is a
It
similar
is. Yeah.
vein as to what you're saying, and it is women, so it's women, and the rise of that, I think, could have a lot to do with it. And everyone, in my opinion, that is eating the processed food, because the processed food is very, very toxic. So the diet itself, the processed diet, is also hammering these, people that are eating like that. It's making them sicker in a lot of other ways, because, I always look at, there's a lot of discussions about, it's this thing, it's that thing, or it's this one thing. It's like it's really not. It's this huge storm, and a lot of the things that are the most important, like what we're saying, you're eating all of this brominated flour, and it's going to block your thyroid from absorbing iodine and all this kind of stuff, and that's going to make you sick. You've got the anemia issue. You're likely making people are way more anemic, even though it's not even picked up, and that's a problem, and that's causing mental issues. But everything combined is just it's horrible to even think of. Like, if you look at the health of the people in this country, and I have nothing but sympathy for people who and I know the agenda is a evil thing, the agendas that are in the world, you know what I mean, but the people who actually suffer from this, that must be terrible. And I don't know, your case was milder, I think, based on the way you were talking about, like, it wasn't as severe a case as some of the other people who suffered from gender dysphoria, but I'm sure that it really weighed on you, and impacted your quality of life,
Hmm.
you
Yeah,
know
it was just nice to like be calm and not be anxious all the time
mm-hmm.
after, and just like to feel masculine and like confident in that way.
Mm-hmm.
It
Yeah.
was so nice afterwards, and it was only like looking back that I could really see how anxious I used to be. And I hope that people can kind of be inspired to like, want to see that change in themselves, because like you don't know what you're missing sometimes. If you've There are a lot of people, they've been anemic like since before they were born, because their mother was anemic,
Mm-hmm.
and and so they've grown up this way, and it hampers their development in a lot of ways.
Mm-hmm.
But you can always make things somewhat better if you
Mm-hmm.
improve like the nutrition that you're
Mm-hmm.
getting now. Like it's super important when you're developing, but even still, like if you could just like improve, if you could increase your blood volume, just like make that your goal, just get more blood,
Mm-hmm.
get more iron so that you can make more blood, and then you'll have more oxygen for your tissues. And when
Mm-hmm.
your tissues have more oxygen, they can function better, right?
Yeah.
Most importantly, the brain can function better. And it's so important.
Yeah. Well, that's really been eye opening for me, especially your experiences, because it helps you look through it in a different way, especially when you're rationalizing the reasons that people have these issues, and how they could be manifesting, and why they don't why they don't seem to be thinking logically, critically, or it doesn't feel rational. It feels just
Yeah.
nuts a lot
I
of the
mean,
times, because yeah. I mean, you've seen the clips of the, there's a lot of excerpts of online, and there was one recently I saw, and the person is clearly, they've lost their mind. It's about someone calling them by the wrong pronoun, and they're screaming and yelling and beating police up and getting dragged away.
He needs to... Stop! Miss! Tickling me! Just say she!
Alpha 7-3.
Josh, can you please just tell them to use the right pronouns? Please! You know it's causing me a lot of distress.
There's something wrong, that needs to be addressed there. That's
Yes.
not, and I don't think all these people are doing it for stunts either. I think there's probably some, but it's like, I think that that's again, like you were talking about extremes, in between mild and extreme, there's people that their quality of life is being eroded, I think,
Yeah.
by this. And so if you can just, like you said, improve your situation. And a lot of people are like, well, you need to go full carnivore and all this kind of stuff. It's like, not necessarily. You need to actually get the nutrient dense food, which you do need to eat meat. If you're not eating meat, you're going to get sick. So add that back in, get rid of the junk. And I think that's a good step. But, well, thank you very much for being here. And I'm going to put your book title is for the audience.
Yeah, I have it up here on my bookshelf. I can show it. It's
Yeah.
called Beyond the Pale, Anemia, the Visible Yet Unseen Cause of Mental Illness and Gender Dysphoria.
Yeah.
And
I like the cover.
obviously,
Nice cover,
it's a
by the
play on
way.
words. Thank you. Yeah, it's
I'm
a very
I'm a
beautiful,
horror novel. I'm a horror novelist, so it's like I've got several books that are on
Yeah.
Amazon right now. But
It's
yeah.
a beautiful oil painting by Henry Fuseli from like the 1700s. But
Oh, that's cool. That's cool.
and it's great because on Amazon, like I know that no bookstore is going to take my book, right? So I don't have to worry about putting a bunch of words on the back of the cover. And I think that eventually people are going to do this all the time because they're going to be selling books on Amazon so much and online.
Yeah.
You don't need to have words on the back. Make it beautiful. Like it's
Yeah.
nice to have it look good. I can put all the info for the book on the side of the Amazon page.
You are on YouTube, and what is
Yeah.
your YouTube
So
channel?
I changed it recently to Beyond the Pale. And I think
Okay.
my name on YouTube is I Am Beyond the Pale, but you can find me there if you search for my name, Brendan Reesor, Beyond the Pale. And that's the title of my book, and that's available on Amazon anywhere. And
And
then
your website.
my website, brendanjreesor.com. And then
Okay.
on Instagram, it's brendan.reesor. And I appreciate anybody's support because I'm doing this by myself. I self-published the book, and I have to market for myself. I'm incredibly proud of the book. It's the best thing I've ever made. It's like incredibly interesting. I promise you that if you're interested in this conversation, you'll love how much you learn from it.
Yeah, I will definitely be reading it. And thank you again for coming. And I will put all the links in the description so that everybody out there can check out his book, because I think it's going to be a good one. It's going to be a good read, And I don't read that many books anymore, but I'm definitely reading this one. So thank you so much for being here. And to everybody out there, like and subscribe, and go to Brendan's site and subscribe and check out what he's got to offer too. And I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye.